Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life, so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 396. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another fabulous guest, the fantastic Jane Talbot. You may recognize her name because I've done loads of work with Jane over the past few months around my sports mindset, and she has helped me a lot. And when I realized that I kept mentioning her on this show, I decided it was time to bring her on the show once again. Once again, you say? Yes, we discussed Jane's adventures a few years ago when she was first on the show in episode 130. That feels like ages ago, and in fact, it was years ago. So I will link to that episode in the show notes as usual. So this was a super juicy conversation, and it is full of super practical tips on how you can improve your sports mindset starting today. And as Jane says, you don't need to be an elite athlete to want to improve your sports mindset. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that every little bit of work on your sports mindset helps to make things easier. I would not have gotten to where I am today with my running without having worked on my running mindset. And I would not have gotten to where I am today with kickboxing without having done loads of Psych K on my kickboxing mindset. So who is Jane Talbot? Jane is an adventurer, author, theater maker, athlete, and coach. Her work in the field of personal development spans more than 23 years. She's passionate about health, community, and adventure. And her coaching programs help people to experience the full joy of bold, authentic living. Today, we're talking about sports mindset. As you could tell from the intro, what are you going to learn? We talk about what is sports mindset. We discuss the difference between growth and fixed mindset in sports. How to know if you need to improve your sports mindset. Why you don't need to be an elite athlete in order to work on your sports mindset. How to know what your limiting beliefs, attitudes, identity, and blocks are. Questions to ask yourself to get clear on your current mindset. How having the wrong sports mindset can hinder your performance. The most common limiting beliefs that people have around sports and performance, how to get through a low point in your mindset during a race or a training. So if you listened to last week's episode, which was about how to know when it's time to quit your adventures, I tell you a story about something that happened to me halfway through a marathon length run that I had a couple of weeks ago. Jane gives a super practical tip on how to get through that. Very practical technique on how to reprogram your mind and make sports easier. Finally, we talk about how you can improve your sports mindset. So I hope you enjoy this episode. It was so useful and practical and juicy. So without further ado, here is the episode. Hello, Jane.
Hello.
I'm very much looking forward to our talk today.
It's good to be able to connect at a time like this.
I know, it is. It is. I feel like my world has been Zoom calls and trails and cats, and that's about it.
Cats?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's right, because mine's been mostly dogs.
Oh. So, we're here today to talk about sports mindset, which is something that you have helped me a lot with. And I've mentioned you so many times on this podcast already that I realized it was important to get you on so that we can actually share you with the listeners and they can hear your words firsthand. So what is sports mindset?
Well, I really think that depends on your outcome. And it certainly doesn't mean that you have to be an elite athlete to benefit from a sports mindset. But for me, if there's anything that you want to achieve from a physical perspective, and that can be anything from walking more often for health to achieving a goal such as 10K personal best or your first couch to 5K, then there are certain things that it's worth literally holding in mind to support you on that journey. So for me, a sports mindset is far more than just having a good training program or even having a goal in mind. It's more about who you think you really are as a person, your identity, and some of your beliefs, values, and attitudes around physical activity. So, for example, if you say, like, okay, I'm going to do a couch to 5K and I've got a program to follow and I'm going to follow that religiously. Some people are okay maybe for the first 2 weeks of a new year. But about this time of year, then certain people may have found it much more difficult to motivate themselves or may have fallen off the wagon. And that's usually because they haven't got a supportive sports mindset in place. That is, if someone were to ask them, who are you? They might not have at an identity level runner in there or athlete in there. In fact, the more expansive the identity, the easier it is to sustain behaviors, including sporting behaviors, effortlessly. Because, you know, if at an identity level you're a runner or an athlete or whatever your chosen physical activity is, then naturally you're going to be the kind of person that effortlessly does those kinds of things. And likewise, if your values and attitudes and beliefs are lined up around that, so some people will say, oh, you know, I really want to run 5K, and they start running, but then some of their beliefs might be around like, well, I'm not really very good at sport. I've always been rubbish at sport. They might hold an attitude that being physically active is a hard thing to do, or they might not have physical activity on their values hierarchy. So our values hierarchy is the things that are important to us in life. And we've got ladders for each area of our life. And if being physically active or fit or whatever your goal is, isn't somewhere high on that ladder, then other things are going to trump that. So, for example, if your cat or your dog is more important to you than running 5K, every time your dog calls for you, like play with me or feed me, and you're just going to step out the door, you might find that you're pulled more in the direction of the dog. So it's not just about the doing or the knowing how to do. It's more about the stuff that sometimes is outside our conscious awareness that's driving the bus. And even, I think the biggest hitter of all is like, well, what do you stand for in life?
Yeah.
And if what you stand for in life is this big inclusive thing, so for me, life, when I think about what I stand for, is in my mid-50s. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I really want to live forever, as long as I can, totally vibrantly alive. That's what I want to be, vibrantly alive. And if that part of me is in charge, then anything I do from a sports point of view is going to have that energy running through it, which means when you look at someone like me training and people say, oh, it's effortless for you. You just get up every day at 6 o'clock and train. It's all right for you. But it's all right for me because really I'm not having to think about it. I'm not having to motivate myself because there's a bigger part of me doing the work. So in terms of developing our sports mindset, it really is about checking in behind the scenes. What's really going on? Who are you? Is this really important to you? Why is it really important to you? What does this mean about you as a person if you start doing these things? And how does it relate to your overall big mission in life? And if you can get that all wired up, aligned, then all the other stuff falls into place. You don't have to be brilliant at sport, but you can really go as far as you possibly can with all this other stuff in place. So having the genes, being lucky with how you were born and your body type, there's not a lot of you can do about that. No. But you can learn about the rules for what makes things work in terms of scheduling your training and operating at the right intensity and having a heart rate monitor and all that kind of stuff. We can have all that kind of stuff going on and in place, but it can feel like wading through treacle if behind the scenes you may be not connected to the bigger part of you, the more expansive part of you that can help you really perform at your best. In a nutshell, That's quite a big nut.
Yes. Well, it's very complex. It's very complex.
Totally digestible, though. You know, that nut and bits.
All right, so let's dig into that nut. So another aspect is the concept of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, which is something that you can have a growth mindset in other areas of your mind, but you can have a fixed mindset in terms of sports. I grew up believing that I could get better in school, I could get better in personal development kinds of things, but I grew up having this belief that I just wasn't good in sports. Because my mother never forced me to do it when I was a kid. I am on the autism spectrum, so I was terrified of flying balls. Like, I hated PE in school, and I was just bad at sports. And no one ever told me in all my years of school that if I practiced, I could get better. Now that seems like, well, obviously that's common sense, but no one ever told me, and for some reason it never occurred to me. So I didn't become sporty until my late 20s. So what do you have to say on that? How can people get that growth mindset?
Well, I think it depends on people's goals. And I certainly agree with you that often as children, we're classified as academic or sporty and not usually as both. Whereas in reality, the things that make us successful as academic individuals, the persistence, that ability to immerse ourselves and be totally curious about the intricacies of various subjects and our ability to be good at learning as a skill, that is a transferable skill in its own right. And I think, that the conditioning, the social conditioning of that's an academic child, that's a sporty child, that is still in place. And the first thing is to become consciously aware that conditioning is there. And then I think the second thing is to become aware of what beliefs, attitudes and values you genuinely have in place. And then the third thing is to harness the wiring that you've got that's so brilliant that you may have used at school for academic learning and just flip it over into the sporting arena. So I was an academic child, a highly academic child. So the other thing is body type. So depending on how you're born, school sports can often favour the mesomorphic body type, the sort of squatter, shorter levers, so shorter arms, shorter legs, more muscular, more power. And those of us who are maybe a bit leaner, maybe geared towards endurance, you don't hear about kids running 10Ks at school or marathons. It doesn't happen because we are kind of late developers. So it's that, first of all, finding your time as well, acknowledging that your time will come. So I'm going to talk about the practical learning and improving bits in a moment, but also that we at school were conditioned to learn for reward. And the reward was we got stars, house points, we might have even got certificates. And all these things mean prizes, going to sixth form, and then you get more certificates, and those things mean prizes. And you go to university and you come out with a degree, and that means prizes, or used to mean prizes, in terms of what kind of work you did and your earning potential. And I think as you get older, you realise it doesn't have to be a prize in order for you to engage in an activity. And you don't even have to be good at something to get something out of it. When I was in my early 20s, I started work, and it was a bit of a shock to be not always engaged in something that you were completely enjoying. It was actually quite stressful, and I started going to aerobics classes. I was rubbish at school. I was so bad. I was tiny. I didn't really grow until I went to university, and I had this strong community spirit. I believed that contribution was important, and we had various sports teams. We had a house system where we were competing against other people at school, and no one was volunteering to put the shot or do the high jump. So I thought, well, I'm going to volunteer for that. What a mistake.
That sounds like hell to me.
I dropped that shot on my foot. I can't remember if it's putting the shot, what it's called, a shot put. Or the put.
Yeah.
But I dropped it on my foot, because I couldn't really throw it. And I was out in the first attempt at the high jump because I ran under the bar because it was too high. And so I was definitely out of my depth, really. But going back into sport in my 20s, and I think that's the thing, is just because you thought something was true 10 or 20 years ago doesn't mean to say it's true now. And just because you were doing things for stars and certificates before doesn't mean to say you have to do them now. So for me, part of the road to a growth mindset for physical activity is to take away that I'm going to be good at it. You'll certainly improve the more you do something because your body's learning just like your brain learns. But I'm going to find something that I'm doing just for the sheer pleasure of being in my body. And that's what I found with aerobics. So aerobics isn't a competitive sport. Well, actually, I think in the 1980s it was a competitive sport. I didn't know that. The competition was more about like how you looked and whether you were wearing a thong in those days.
And how big your hair was.
Have one of those. And it was just moving and dancing and feeling really, really good. And then getting the benefits of raising your heart rate on a regular basis. And because of that, then I thought, well, they became that was my gateway into other things like running, and running runs in my family. And I think I had that thing. I was like, my dad was a really good runner. I've got two other brothers and they were good footballers. And I thought, well, it's just not my thing. And I'm always going to be not as good as them. But I really got into running from a social point of view. So in the 80s and 90s, so at the moment I live in Northern Ireland. My parents and my brothers live in England. But in the 80s and 90s, I would go to different races around the country with my dad, my mum and my dad, and we would race together. I'm not running at the same pace, but my then husband, he was a runner as well. And it was a complete social thing. And it didn't really matter how fast I was running, although I was improving because I was regularly running. But I think it's that finding the thing that in you that lights you up, that doesn't have to be anything to do with sport. So for me, it was, having that contact with my family, having that contact with the human race, literally people around you, having a chat. There's so many interesting people on half marathons and marathons because you're running slowly enough to actually have a chat.
Yeah.
So it was like human contact and being physical in your body and being out in nature and getting all the rewards from that and eventually improving. I mean, if you do want to improve, if there's a part of you that wants to improve, if you follow any training program intelligently, you don't overdo it. Because there are things like, Red January or wherever it is where you're running every day. And I don't actually agree with that because I don't think you actually improve. And I think you degrade your body. But looking after your body, following an appropriate level of training, you will definitely improve. If you want to get quicker in whatever your chosen sport is or stronger, there are structured and easy to access ways of doing that. But for me, it's like, well, the other things, that mindset in place first about finding your entry point, doing it for the sheer joy of moving, doing it for just being in your body and the wonder of what your body can actually do, especially as you get older. At the moment, obviously, we can't go to gyms and things like that. I go to a CrossFit box, they call them, instead of gyms. And it's such a wonderful community because everybody wants everybody else to succeed. And if you lift a really, your one repetition max, the heaviest you can lift once, everybody's whooping and hollering and ringing bells. I mean, it's a joyous thing. And it gives you a break from the rest of what's going on in your life. You can be totally focused, totally present when you're training hard. All you can be present to is that particular moment. You can't be present to anything else. And so it can offer you this quality of presence that regular life can't. So it's finding the inroad, drop the notion of like being the best. Yeah, if you want to be the best, you can. And there are lots of ways of doing that. But finding the joy in just moving, for me, that's the key.
Yeah, it is. So how can someone know if their sports mindset is hindering them or holding them back? And how do you know if you need to improve your sports mindset?
I think, first of all, like I don't have to. That sounds like I've got an issue. I better clear that up.
Something to work on.
If I want to complete all my work during the day, walk the dog, cook and everything else, if I want to do that and train, And I, at the moment, having to train for my goals, I'm training twice a day, once in the morning before work and then in the afternoon after work. And I know there's something to be cleared up if I think, oh, shit, I don't want to do that. And it's very rare I feel that. And so what that says to me is, okay, there's something going on that's getting in the way of this flow. So if I'm having to force myself to motivate myself, what is it that I may be believing? So sometimes I believe, oh, God, this is going to be a really hard session. And usually it is a really hard session, but I actually really like that burrowing into the grit of your belly to get the work done. I actually like it. But if I'm thinking at the beginning, oh, this is going to be hard, this is going to be too hard, this is going to do me in, or I'm too tired for this, then that lets me know there's something going on that I need to tidy up. Or it flags up some genuine physiological issue. Because sometimes people can get so enthusiastic that they fail to respect the needs and wants of their body. So I might then check, like, what's my training schedule looking like right now? So I have a coach to keep me safe. And what I mean by safe is, because I'm an endurance athlete, the way I'm wired up is, and this would be the same for people who enjoy other endurance sports, one of our qualities as an endurance athlete is the ability to keep going. And we often run that as a fractal, a complex repeating pattern of nature in our life. So endurance athletes won't just keep going while they're running or cycling, but they'll also keep going in relationships when they should stop. They'll keep going at work when they should have closed the laptop and switched off and done something else. And so I have a coach to make sure that I don't keep going and get in the way of my overall outcomes. So I should feel energized, and my coaching is and my training is periodized. Some really hard bits for a couple of weeks, and then I get a lighter couple of weeks. So if I'm feeling like, gosh, I don't want to do something, I check, right, maybe my coaching, my program needs a bit of a tweak because I'm old, relatively speaking, for my sport, and I've got a younger coach. Is it that's the problem? Or is it actually me that's the problem? So the first thing I'll do is let's say I'm getting on the bike first thing in the morning. And sometimes it's my head. Okay, so I'm actually cycling. I thought I was tired. I'm actually feeling really brilliant. I thought this was going to be rubbish, but it's actually really great. So first of all, I do a test. And then if that's not working, I think, okay, what is it? What's going on? What's going on? What's competing for my motivation? Have I got worries that I need to put to rest? So sometimes in January, I've this big acute worry called my tax return. And it's I always leave it to the last minute, and it plays on my mind. The amount of energy other things take up in your head and in your body are surprising. So what else is taking up space? And then if it is taking up space and I can't do anything about it in that moment, how can I use the energy that's being taken up? So that energy, that worrying energy, that's quite a high energy. Anxiety is a high energy. You can actually use that to help you complete what it is that you want to do. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. So you mentioned earlier that the sports mindset is made up of beliefs, attitudes, identity. How can you determine what your current beliefs and attitudes are and what they might need to change to?
Okay, so if someone were to ask you the question, who are you? We are often asked, how are you?
Yeah.
Not often asked, who are you? And if we are, we never give the fullest answer. No. We probably just give our name. So you might just stop for a moment and ask, who are you? And see what comes up. And see also how those phrases are made. So I'm Jane, I'm a mother. And if I just said, I'm just a mother, or I'm only a jogger, oh, I'm just an amateur. So what comes up? And if you think, well, actually, there's no identity level, I'm not holding any kind of sportswomanship or sportsmanship, then you might play around with that. So first thing you can do is just keep digging. Who am I? Who else am I? Who else am I? Who else am I? And just go to the absolute limit. And if sports and athletic identity isn't in there, add it in. And there are various ways you can do that. So if you're on social media, and I play around with this all the time, on Facebook and on Twitter, for example, you can put a little bio in. So I always put athlete.
Oh.
I put athletes in there. And I tried that with other things. So I'm a writer and a theatre maker. And I wanted to tour a show I'd written myself. And getting bookings and getting into theatre spaces is quite challenging. And so I thought, like, what identity would be really handy for me to have while I'm making those connections with people? And so I decided that I would play around with an alternative identity. Do you know what? The word has gone straight out of my head. I can't actually think what it is. I might actually just have to go onto Facebook just now and just have a look at what I've got. Obviously, I haven't been making theatre while lockdown has been on, and that's probably why. Oh, yeah, that's right. And it's a really good one. Impresario.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's what I've got. Identity level, obviously, it's buried a little bit, but impresario. So you can start then saying that, you write it down, and actually notice what happens when you start including this identity level. And I think it's one of the reasons. So I talked about CrossFit earlier. They don't call people their clients. They call people their athletes.
Ooh, I like that.
No matter what level you're at, even if you're a total beginner, you are referred to as an athlete. And part of that is helping you to expand your identity. And then when you think about your being an athlete, so if you said whatever your chosen sport is, so mixed martial arts or karate or whatever it is, so if you think about what you want to exceed at or excel at, so let's say you want to excel at as a runner. So you say, I am a runner. And then listen for the voice that comes up. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just a jogger. But this is then all your attitudes and beliefs coming up. Oh, I can't run fast. You know, so if you think about what you believe makes up a good runner, so a good runner runs fast. They win races. They do well in their age group. Oh, I can't do that. I'll never be able to do that. And then you might dig, and then you might get yourself to defend some of those beliefs. And so a good question for defense is why? So why can't you? Because that brings up everything you have to defend. You get quite defensive, and that'll bring up new stuff. Well, I'm too fat, I'm too slow, I'm too old, I haven't got the right genes, my bones are too big, my shoes are all wrong, I haven't got a treadmill to train indoors at winter. So all of these things then can be challenged. And like, what is my purpose? When you ask yourself, what is my purpose in running? What is it that's important to me about running? You know, is it being vibrantly alive? Is it winning? So being connected to your purpose, the big why behind, means that you can always find it easier to do the thing, whatever it is your chosen thing is, if you're connected to that bigger why. So I want to run, cycling, swimming, because it makes me feel really alive when I'm doing it. And anything else, the getting good at it, is just a byproduct of me feeling fully alive. So why are these things important to me? So asking why helps to flush out some of your key motivations and some of the things that you might need to clear up.
Oh, I love what you said about identity, because I think it's such a good exercise to add those kind of words to your bio, because I was updating my author bio, I don't know, a few months ago. And I was looking at it, and I always like to include, I like hiking and walking long distance trails. And I originally put in kickboxing, and then I removed it because I felt like, that doesn't feel right. Saying that I'm a kickboxer, that I enjoy kickboxing. I don't know. There's something about it that didn't feel right, and I removed it. And as I was just listening to you now, I was thinking, like, I'm a brown black belt. Like, my next grading, whenever that's going to be, whenever lockdown is over, is going to be black. Like, I've been doing it for a while. Like, I've gotten to a certain level. Black belt, you suppose that you've mastered the basics. Like, that's not bad. It's not like I'm just starting out. Like, and yet I still can't put it in my bio.
Yeah. So what you got wired in is that you believe you can only really be a proper martial artist if you're at a black belt level.
Yeah.
Whereas my view is, if you put on a pair of running shoes and go out, even if you keep stopping, if you even have small bouts of running, you are immediately a runner, and you should see yourself as such.
Yes. Oh, and I love that you say that too, because like, I don't think running is in my bio. And yet, as you know, and as people listening to this podcast know, that I've been, working on my running. 2 weeks ago, I ran 42 kilometers. Like, that's a marathon. I did it.
That's like, elite running.
I'm a runner.
You're an elite athlete now. So I think the reason why it's so important to be prepared, because it doesn't always feel comfortable, but you can grow into that identity. And that identity is far more expansive. So if you imagine a pyramid in your mind's eye, so practicing the sport and knowing the skills for the sport are right at the bottom of that pyramid. And then as you move up, beliefs, attitudes, values, your identity and your bigger goal, your bigger mission in life, those are much higher up the pyramid and are far more powerful. So if you have dialed in at identity level runner, then everything that goes on at the lower levels, that on the ground, literally on the ground, becomes easier, and you find it easier to keep going, to keep motivated, to be prepared to practice, because it's that higher part of you at identity level that's doing the work, rather than at the lower practical ground level. So I think, put it into your bio and then grow into it.
Yes.
And the more you see it and the more you say it, the more it's true. I mean, so you're called Holly and I'm called Jane, but, was there anything about me when I was born that was like the Janeness of a Jane? How am I entitled actually to be Jane? I know people who've changed their names in life, and I only know them as the other name, but at an identity level, they've managed to change something as fundamental as something they may have been called or identified with for 30 or 40 years of their life. It's completely possible to play with that and to be really playful with it. And who am I going to be today? And that's, I suppose, another belief of mine. It's there to be played full out. You can play. So, who do you want to be today? And a year ago, I wasn't a cyclist. 18 months ago, I was an absolute rubbish swimmer.
Really?
And then, 18 months ago, or July 2019, I decided I wanted to learn to swim butterfly just for the joy of power of it. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, it does.
It's really, really hard. And I had a really humiliating experience as a child doing my voluntary community activity. But the swim team that needed a butterfly, and I volunteered, I couldn't do it. And I was slow clapped. And while everybody else had finished swimming, I couldn't even do it. I just had to backstroke my way in. So I thought, I'm going to have another go. And I'm in my 50s, and the swimming coach says, Jane, look, I'm not sure if you can do this. And I'm thinking, I said, look, I don't care whether I can do it or not. Let's just have a go.
Yeah.
The joy is in let's just see how far I can go. And as it turned out, I could do it. You can do it, because I was so plugged into this idea of joy and not really attached to the outcome at all. Yeah. But the byproduct was that I had to learn to swim front crawl well. I could do breaststroke. But front crawl I hadn't swum for years, and I found it really hard just to swim one length without getting out of breath. He said, well, you can't swim butterfly all the time. It's just literally too hard. You just can't do it. But you're going to have to improve your swimming endurance. You're going to have to do it with front crawl, I'm afraid. So you're going to have to learn to swim front crawl. And actually, I got to really enjoy the feeling. It's kind of laminar flow, this kind of twisting and turning. You kind of corkscrew through the water for me, it was, to start with, a very slow torpedo. When I was thinking about me, I never had, and the penny hadn't dropped, I never had swimmer at identity level because I wasn't very good at it. Until I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, my times are reducing. What would happen if I decided I was going to be a swimmer? So I put myself in for an aquathlon, which is a running and swimming race. And lo and behold, there I was, aquathlete. So I decided when lockdown came, hey, I've got the hang of this now. I'm going to be a triathlete. So I've got my bike out of the shed. So now I'm training like a pro. I've actually just made the Irish team to compete in the aquathlon in my age group in Holland in October. It is totally possible. And that's from me So I had the swim of my life in September. I posted a time that was great enough for me to qualify for the Irish team. And that really happened because A, I wasn't really attached to the outcome, but B, I was just so loving being in my body, in the water, in the sea. I mean, I had to swim for the first time in open water.
Wow.
Because close in the sea and in lakes. I was petrified to start with. But it was that, like, I just wonder. And it was that curiosity. And I think curiosity, I just wonder how far I can go with this. I wonder if I can improve with this. And when I say I wonder, I swam 5 or 6 days a week last summer because I was just wondering. And every time I swam, something changed and I paid attention to that. And I think that's the other thing in the sports mindset is when you're going and doing your thing, you're not just doing it. Although you can do it for the love of it, but you're also paying attention to your body and making micro adjustments because you know your body better because you're spending time in it, being joyful. You're not punching it. You're not saying, oh, come on, work harder. Usually it's the other way around. Your body is totally capable and your mind's saying, come on, give me a break. Let me get off the bike.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. What are some examples of how having the wrong sports mindset can hinder your performance or hinder your experience?
Oh, well, so if you believe that it's not possible for you, then it shuts down a lot of options. So there are people who think that they're too old to start running.
Yep, that was me last summer.
So they just don't even, it stops you in your tracks, they don't even try.
Yeah.
And then there's people who say, oh, like, okay, my bones, are too weak or like, because I haven't done physical activity, then I'm never actually going to improve. And therefore, if I'm not brilliant at it, I'm not even going to try. And then the other thing is that when you actually do start and people will say things like, oh, yeah, but it's really hard and I'm out of breath. So the belief is, okay, if it's out of breath and it hurts, and I don't mean your bones are hurting, but it's deeply uncomfortable. Instead of thinking, wow, this is right. This is so right. It's unbelievable. They think, wow, this is so wrong. I've got to stop. So part of it is that having the knowledge, there is a knowledge component to this, and this is being structured and intelligent about how you develop yourself as an athlete. So your body will adapt to the training load. So you go out and you jog and walk, jog, and eventually you might be able to run 5K. And then your body says, okay, I can run 5K at this speed. Now what? But what usually happens then is people then go out and jog and they just keep jogging. And they say, do you know, I'm not improving. And in fact, I'm going backwards because what's happened is the body has adapted. It's become more economical. It go further with a lower heart rate. It's because it's become fitter. So the body needs to be constantly stimulated. And that's done in several ways. You might run further or exercise longer at a lower heart rate. Or you might do some fast speed sessions to stimulate different parts of the system. So the belief that being uncomfortable is wrong can hold people back, saying like, oh, it's dangerous for my heart rate to go up. Well, no. It's actually, that's the aim of the game there are certain thresholds at which you should train to get a different training response. So it's really worth finding out about how to train and then paying attention to what your body's doing, saying, actually, the messages it's giving me, which I thought were alarm bells, are actually, oh, you're in the right place. Well, to the zone, you're in the right place. And it's wrong to sweat. No, it's completely right to sweat. Having beliefs that strength training will make you bulky as a woman, that's another common one. No, it won't. Yeah. It'll actually make you stronger, more like if you think about what you're putting your body through, this thing called life, having a strong, resilient body actually plays out in that fractal, that complex repeating pattern of nature. So what we know is that people who engage in sport and who make their bodies stronger are often more resilient in other areas of their life. So they cope better when the shit hits the fan. Yeah. They are literally stronger. So that things having to be comfortable, no, things have to be a little bit uncomfortable for you to make progress, and that can get in the way of us. And there are other practical things, of course, being organised. I haven't got time in my life. That's the real common one. Oh, I've got no time for that. It's all right for you. You've got time to do that. But the people who have got the time for that, they're usually busier than everybody else. But they have planned, being able to plan food,
Yeah.
cooking, the whole life to create that space. Because if it is important enough, people will do it. And so the thing, I suppose, that really is getting in the way for many people is it genuinely isn't important enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
How important does it have to be? How important does your health have to be? Are you asking the right questions when it comes to importance? Because people usually say, oh, relaxation is really important. Yeah, okay, you're stressed, relaxation is important. And sometimes being very stressed and being physically active at the same time isn't the ideal combination, and you need to back off. But sometimes actually exercise is the antidote to stress. You know, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to get that's important for you by relaxing? Are you trying to recharge? You're trying to have some headspace. Okay, so how is exercise not creating that space and that recharge? And usually actually think, oh, it is. It's another road. It's another road for me. So every time you come up against what seems like a roadblock or an excuse, you can actually challenge that and think, well, is this really true? What is this getting me that's supporting my outcome of being healthy and fit for life? And if it isn't supporting me, then what is it that's stopping me from going ahead and doing? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what can people do in terms of mindset when they're going through a low point in their training, like specifically in an endurance event kind of? So when I was in the middle of my 42K run a couple weeks ago, so about halfway through, I was approaching the spot where my husband was going to meet me and refill my water and my tailwind and everything. And I was ready to quit. And my mind was just in one of those negative loops. And it was like, I'm not enjoying this. I run because I enjoy it. If I'm not enjoying it, should I even do it? No, I'll just get in the car and go home. How do you get through that?
So it's like you drop down into a lower level of that pyramid and it's playing itself
on a loop.
First of all, is having the awareness that you're there. That's really important. And by the way, that's really common, Holly. I ran ultra marathons with my now husband, and I just pick a fight. I just pick a fight with him. That's it. Why are you running so fast? Why are you making me do this? And I heard myself, and he said, "You're just in the picking a fight stage." So having the awareness of where you're at is really important, and the awareness of knowing that in the pyramid of life, where identity in that big mission is much higher up and much more powerful. You're believing at that point that it's not worth it. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. You made a mistake. You'll never be doing this again. Reminds me, it's like, when people give birth. I'm never doing this again 5 years later. So you want to click then. You need to wire in to the next level up. So remind yourself, who am I really? I'm Holly the runner. What is it I'm doing this for? Why? What's my bigger why? Why am I here? Really? Why am I here? Well, how is what I'm doing right now plugged in to my mission in life? And once you can plug back into that, then it's a lot easier to carry on. And the other thing is to condition something that becomes so unconscious, it kind of saves you. And so when things are going well, you can actually say, okay, things are going really well. I'm going to keep the plug going as long as I can on this, or have something come up automatically. And I have a mantra, and I used to have to do it consciously. And the mantra was, light as air, just keep going. Light as air, just keep going. And if I felt myself light as air kind of in the zone, I'd just start saying it. I thought, I'm here. And even if I knew that I couldn't stay there forever, I would keep saying it. So have that mantra. And on the bike, when I'm doing turbo sessions, all my turbo sessions are really quite hard. So I'm in that, like, I'm going to die. I think I'm going to die. My heart rate's really high, feels really, really tough. And I'm really having to dig in to get the work done. And I look at a spot on my bike and I just say to myself, if this is what it takes, so that's linked into my overall goal. If this is what it takes, I'm doing it. And I say it over and over again. And it provides a rhythm. If this is what it takes, I'm doing it. If this is what it takes, I'm doing it. And what I found is, so I had a race. It was the one race of the year in September. And I had forgotten that it was the first time I raced in open water. It was the national championships. And I was so nervous that I had forgotten to eat. And I'm the kind of person, so I'd eaten my breakfast, but I actually have 2 breakfasts. And I'd forgotten my second breakfast. I eat a lot of calories and I literally eat just before I race or run. And I got into the water, the gun went off and I thought, I haven't eaten and I'm starving. And I started to swim. And then what automatically kicked in, because I'd conditioned it so often, was if this takes, meaning I haven't eaten, but if this is what it takes, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I got out of the water and I was shaking with hunger and I had still to run a first 5K. And this voice in my head just kept going. If this is what it takes, I'm doing it. And that is because I had conditioned it. Yeah. So you want to condition a mantra when the going is good.
Okay.
It's easy to condition it when the going is good. This is what it takes. Or whatever your mantra is, like I say, just keep going. Or I'm fast and fleet as foot, or whatever it is. And then what you find is if you've conditioned it sufficiently, when you need it, it'll either appear or just start saying it. And everything that is attached to that conditioning, attached to that word that's a semantically packed words rooted deep in your nervous system, it pulls it all out. That's how it works for me.
It's almost like an NLP anchor, except instead of having like a point that you touch on your body, it's the mantra.
Exactly. It's an auditory anchor. Exactly. That's what it is.
I like that. Okay, so how can someone improve their sports mindset? I know we've talked about identity and we've talked about having a mantra. And what are some other ways that people can improve?
Their mindset in particular, I think the biggest tip is really to know yourself. So personal development, any kind of personal development where you have to face who you really are. I mean, most of the time, don't have to face who we really are. And we learn often who we really are in times of conflict. And I suppose one of the things that the pandemic has given us the opportunity to is if we're in relationships, we're in maybe more contact with our other halves, and there's maybe been a little bit more conflict than usual, because we've been literally locked down. Yeah. So there are plenty of opportunities to learn about who you really are. And I think that if I had one piece of advice is any personal development program, including just like one-to-one coaching, it doesn't have to be with sport in mind, any kind of personal development will allow you to know, knowing yourself and understanding. So some of our self-limiting beliefs, our maybe identity isn't as expansive as it could be. Maybe if we think about what our big mission in life is and how inclusive that is and how we can plug into that. Some of us, if you ask, like, what is your life really about? How many times have you been asked that? I mean, if we work in personal development, obviously,
Yeah, it's normal.
we're meditating on that all the time. But in our regular daily lives, these things don't often come up. So first of all, it's worth doing a bit of digging, a bit of kind of, I suppose you could call it archaeology of the nervous system. Dig down, see who you really are. Then you've got to really decide who you want to be. You've got to really decide, what is it you really want in life? What do you want your life to stand for? What do you want to be on your gravestone when the day comes, when your time is coming to an end and you look back? What shape do you want your life to have taken? Who do you want to have been? What words do you want associated with you that are important to you? And so go from like, here I am now. This is how I want to be as a person. And then do some of the stuff to change that. So for me, it's like once you start moving, once you start doing your sport, it will bring all of this stuff up. Doing something new will bring all of this stuff up. So all of this stuff came up for me when I got on the bike for the first time, because I was doing Zoom sessions with these like elite triathletes. My bike's like 25 years old, right, which is old for a bike. I didn't have a speed sensor, a cadence sensor. I was borrowing my husband's turbo trainer. I didn't really know how it worked. I didn't know how gears worked. I didn't even change gears because I didn't know like what gear I was supposed to be in. I didn't have all the kit. And all this stuff was coming up. It naturally comes up when you put yourself in an uncomfortable place. So the belief was, I needed a better bike. If only I had the right cycling shorts. My heart rate monitor couldn't be telling me the truth. All these kind of stuff. I'm rubbish. I'm never going to be as good as them. Okay, I haven't got enough cycling in my legs because I'm 50 and they've been cycling for 30 years. That's a limiting belief. I'm not a cyclist. I'm a runner. That's a limiting belief. I don't think I can actually get good at this. That was a limiting belief. So once you start to hear, putting yourself in that situation, pushing yourself, that'll bring up everything you need to work on to improve your mindset.
Excellent. So Jane, I've worked with you quite a bit in the last few months, and you've helped me massively with my sports mindset. Can you tell listeners, how do you work with people? How do you help them with their sports mindset?
So first of all, I look at that whole pyramid I was talking about, and I investigate with people where they're at each of those layers and help them to resolve issues for each of the layers. But I start where the biggest bang is. And that's usually belief, attitudes, value, and identity. So I would use things from NLP and hypnosis. So you can do identity expanding protocols. You can do belief changes. You can do values elicitation. So I think that's a really important thing that people can do right now. People are listening to this. One thing is to ask yourself, when you think about physical activity, what is important to you? And you'll come up with about 7 things. And then you can rank those things in sequence with the highest importance at the top. There are a couple of other things that you might want to do to make sure that they are actually sequenced in the right order. But what's more important is then to understand why those things are important to you. And if anything, when you ask yourself, well, why is that important to me? If anything negative comes up, that's a clue that helps you understand why maybe you're not enjoying or getting the results you want in that sporting part of your life. And that can be cleared up. So using things like timeline therapy, for example, would be one way of emotional clearing techniques. And then there are stuff to help resolve conflict. So often we have got a part of ourselves that really wants to be physically active, and then we've got a part of ourselves that wants to lie on the sofa. And if that conflict isn't resolved, then it becomes a tug of war that all your energy is deployed trying to broker the peace between those two parts of yourself, where sometimes you'll get out, but the part of you didn't want to get out and wants to stay on the sofa. It's like a teenager that you're having to drag around with you. So you're never completely free to run, and you're never completely allowed to just rest on the sofa, because the part of you that wants to run is say, hey, get off of the sofa. And then there are things we can do to condition behavior so they become automatic. So in NLP, there are things like swish patterns. So there are triggers we can install in ourselves to generate clear motivation to get out the door and do the thing that we really want to do for our health and mental well-being. And that's how I work with people. I also work with people in groups to help them, because other things that get in the way of being physical activities, our relationship with our body and our relationship with food. And if that isn't healthy, that can really get in the way. I think for me, it's really important that people believe that no matter what your body shape and no matter what your fitness level is right now, you can be more physically active. You can enjoy physical activity. You can enjoy being in your body as your body is right now.
And that's huge. I mean, I, for years, always thought, well, I can run long distance, like when I lose weight, and I can get better at kickboxing when I lose weight. And then I started realizing that, yes, obviously losing weight makes it easier, but I can start where I am now and I can still improve. Like, I don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is that that's a belief people have and they'll say I'm going to start running when I'm size 10.
Yeah, not necessary.
And it might be a long time coming because actually running can help them become the size 10 or whatever it is. And actually when they start to run, they might actually change their mind about what physical activity is doing for them. So if you can disconnect any kind of penitence involved in sport. So if your big why for exercise is losing weight, and that's not necessarily great, because for one thing, it means that once you have lost the weight, you'll lose your motivation for exercising. but you're using exercise as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. The joy and pleasure of just being in your body is something that you're probably going to be able to keep at for life.
Mm-hmm. My husband said something to me once that is always stuck in my mind whenever I think about this. He always says, now when I'm training today, it's like an investment in my future health.
Yes.
I don't want to be old and like crickety and rusty and like in pain all the time. Like I want to invest the time and the energy now so that I can be healthier when I'm older. I don't want to be in pain when I'm older.
It's a huge act of self-care.
Yeah.
And if you positioned it in that way, maybe it would be easier, or people would feel okay about taking the time to do it.
Yeah. And also knowing that you don't have to be number one or the fastest or the strongest or whatever, because any movement you do is going to be better for your health now and in the future. So any little bit is good.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today. This was such a great conversation, and I could keep talking to you for ages. But before we sign off, where can people find you online and learn more about how to work with you?
Oh, people can find me on my website, janetalbot.com, and they can find me on Facebook, Jane Talbot Humans Resourced, and on Twitter @IntrepidJane.
I like that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your wisdom about sports mindset. I think this is super, super useful.
You're very welcome, and I've loved talking with you, Holly.
Thank you. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. But before you go, I would like to suggest that you take action today on one of the things that Jane suggested. If you are a runner or a martial artist or a cyclist or a swimmer or whatever, but you haven't really been identifying as that, or you're afraid to identify as that, I would suggest that you do what she said and put those things in your bio. Put them in your Twitter bio, your Facebook bio, your website bio. Add those things to your bio, even if they feel like a stretch, to give yourself the opportunity to grow into those things and to add those things to your identity. And then pay attention to how your performance improves in those areas. So that is my suggestion for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would make a huge difference in getting this podcast out to new listeners. So that is all for now. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/396 for the show notes on this episode. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.